The quantum resonance sensors hummed with an intensity that made the hair on the back of Elena Rodriguez's neck stand on end. Something was wrong. Profoundly, fundamentally wrong. The Horizon wasn't just any exploration vessel. Commissioned just 2 years prior, it represented the pinnacle of human deep space technology. Its hull was a marvel of adaptive metamaterials, capable of self-repair and molecular reconfiguration that would make most xenoengineers weep with envy. But today, those advanced systems were registering something that defied every known scientific protocol. "Kai, run the scan again," Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the growing tension. Dr. Kai Chen's augmented eyes flickered with a kaleidoscope of data streams. Cybernetic implants that had cost more than most people's entire genetic lineage processed information at speeds that blurred the line between human and machine. Confirming previous readings, "Captain," he responded, a slight tremor in his voice betraying his excitement. "The quantum signature is impossible." The bridge crew of 12 watched in a mixture of anticipation and growing unease. Humanity had spent the last century proving itself to the Galactic Confederacy, a bureaucratic nightmare of species that had long viewed humans as technological upstarts. Every mission was a chance to demonstrate their worth, to show that they were more than just the youngest species at the diplomatic table. Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o, the ship's tactical officer, brought up a holographic display that made the entire bridge collectively hold its breath. The scan showed a region of space that, according to every galactic map and treaty, should have been empty. Completely, utterly vacant. But it wasn't. Something was there. Something that shouldn't exist. The quantum resonance pattern suggested a massive energy signature, unlike anything in the known galactic catalogs. It wasn't just hidden. It was deliberately obscured, with layers of technological camouflage that spoke of intentional concealment. "We're in the Zarkov buffer zone," warned Commander Marcus Chen, the ship's veteran navigation officer. His voice carried the weight of decades of interstellar experience. 1 millisecond off our approved corridor, and we're declaring an act of war. Elena Rodriguez knew the stakes. Humans had worked decades to be taken seriously by the Galactic Confederacy. One wrong move could undo generations of diplomatic progress. The Zarkov Dominion was notoriously territorial, with a reputation for responding to perceived intrusions with overwhelming genocidal force. But something about this discovery transcended standard operational procedures. "Enhanced quantum resonance," Dr. Kai Chen muttered, more to himself than to the crew. "These energy signatures, they're not just hiding something. They're protecting something." The ship's AI, an advanced quantum intelligence named ARIA, interrupted with a crisp, almost human-like voice. "Captain Rodriguez, probability analysis indicates a 94.7% chance that continued investigation will result in direct conflict with Zarkov patrol units." Elena's hand unconsciously traced the small metal pinned to her uniform, a relic from her grandmother, who had been part of the first generation of humans to break free from Earth's limited perspective and embrace true interstellar exploration. "Plot a detailed scan," she ordered. "Full spectrum. I want to know exactly what's hiding out there." The bridge crew exchanged glances. They all understood what this meant. This wasn't just another scientific mission. This was a potential turning point. Lieutenant Nyong'o's fingers danced across her holographic control panel, initiating deep scan protocol. "Quantum entanglement buffers at maximum. We're going to be as invisible as possible." The ship hummed with potential energy, decades of human innovation, adaptive technologies, quantum communication systems, AI-enhanced decision matrices, converged in this singular moment of exploration. They were about to discover something that would change everything. Neither the crew of the Horizon nor the watching Zarkov patrol units could possibly understand how profoundly this moment would reshape galactic history. First contact was rarely what anyone expected, and humanity was about to prove that once again. The encrypted data fragment materialized on the holographic display like a wounded animal, fractured, bleeding information that seemed to pulse with forbidden knowledge. Dr. Kai Chen's augmented neural interface worked overtime, his consciousness dancing along quantum decryption algorithms that would have crashed conventional systems. "My God," he whispered, a rare moment of unfiltered human emotion breaking through his typically clinical demeanor. Captain Rodriguez was at his side instantly. The bridge had gone silent, the usual hum of advanced machinery reduced to a barely perceptible vibration that seemed to match the tension crackling through the air. The fragment wasn't just data. It was a record, a horrifying archaeological testament to galactic genocide. Elena commanded, "Full security lockdown. No transmissions." Not yet. The ship's quantum AI responded immediately. Layers of encryption blossomed around the data like protective membranes, isolating the information from any potential external interception. Whatever they had discovered, the implications were too significant to risk premature exposure. Kai's cybernetic eyes flickered, processing centuries of compressed information in milliseconds. "This goes beyond the Zarkov Dominion's standard territorial aggression," he said, his voice a mixture of scientific fascination and growing horror. "This is systematic elimination of emerging civilizations." The data revealed a pattern that defied everything humanity had been told about galactic political structures. The Zarkov weren't just a dominant military force. They were systematic architects of genocide, methodically removing any species that showed potential for advanced technological development. Entire civilizations reduced to statistical records. Billions of lives erased from history. On Earth, the United Planetary Council was about to receive the most explosive transmission in human exploratory history. The underground communication hub beneath the Geneva Archaeological Complex buzzed with anticipation. Dr. Imani Okoro, humanity's leading xenopolitical strategist, watched the incoming data stream with a predator's intensity. "This changes everything," she muttered to herself. Back on the horizon, Captain Rodriguez understood the weight of their discovery. Humanity had always been viewed as the galactic newcomers, naive, technologically immature, constantly struggling to prove their worth in the Byzantine political landscape of the Galactic Confederacy. This discovery was their leverage. "Compile a full report," she instructed Kai. "Every detail. Cross-reference with our xenorchaeological databases. I want to know the full scope of what we've uncovered." The ship's systems worked in perfect synchronization. Quantum processors parsed through millennia of compressed data, revealing a horrifying galactic history of calculated suppression. The Zarkov hadn't just been conquering. They had been systematically preventing any potential competition. Lieutenant Nyong'o's tactical display suddenly flashed a warning. Zarkov patrol signatures were approaching, their energy signatures cutting through the void like razor-sharp predators sensing potential prey. "We've been detected," she announced, her voice calm despite the imminent threat. Elena's response was instantaneous. Adaptive camouflage. Maximum quantum entanglement. "We disappear." The horizon wasn't just a ship. It was a testament to human technological innovation, a vessel that could literally bend the fundamental rules of detection. Metamaterial hull plating began to reconfigure, quantum algorithms dancing across its surface, creating a disruption field that would make the ship virtually invisible to conventional scanning technologies. But invisibility wasn't their only defense. "Prepare communication package," Elena ordered. "If they fire, we broadcast everything." It was a nuclear option of information warfare. The raw, unfiltered data of the Zarkov's systematic genocide would be transmitted across every known communication channel in the Galactic Confederacy, not just a defensive maneuver, but a strategic checkmate. Dr. Kai Chen's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, compressing and weaponizing information. Each data packet was a potential revolution, a truth that could reshape galactic political structures. The Zarkov patrol vessels drew closer. Their massive energy signatures suggested overwhelming firepower, the kind of technological superiority that had kept emerging species in check for millennia. They had no idea what was about to hit them. Humanity was done being the galaxy's naive newcomers. This was their moment of reckoning. The Quantum Adaptive Systems Lab looked more like a cathedral of innovation than a research facility. Holographic displays cascaded like crystalline waterfalls, each projection representing years of cutting-edge research that would redefine the boundaries of known technology. Dr. Aya Nakamura stood at the epicenter of humanity's greatest technological revolution, her augmented hands moving with surgical precision across quantum interfaces that seemed to breathe with living intelligence. "We're not just building weapons," she muttered to her team of 20 brilliant researchers. "We're creating a paradigm shift." The nanite swarm prototype hummed to life. Billions of microscopic machines began to coalesce, their collective intelligence far beyond any traditional computational system. These weren't just tools. They were a collective consciousness capable of adaptive problem-solving that defied traditional engineering principles. On the primary display, a simulation of spacecraft molecular reconfiguration played out. Where traditional ships would be destroyed by energy weapons, these nanites could restructure hull materials instantaneously. A direct hit would be transformed into nothing more than a momentary light show, the ship's very molecular structure dancing and adapting faster than any weapon could penetrate. Across the complex, other teams worked on equally revolutionary projects. The Quantum Entanglement Communication Division had cracked a code that would make traditional interception impossible. Instantaneous, unhackable communication that could transmit complex data across light years in a fraction of a second. Dr. Marcus Way, head of AI Combat Network Research, was pushing the boundaries of machine intelligence. Traditional military strategy is reactive, he explained to a group of senior military strategists. Our systems don't just respond. They predict, they learn, they evolve. The AI combat networks being developed could process strategic scenarios at speeds that made human decision-making look like prehistoric thinking. They could analyze millions of potential tactical outcomes in milliseconds, adapting strategies faster than any biological intelligence could comprehend. In another wing of the facility, Dr. Elena Volkov's team worked on adaptive camouflage technologies that would make stealth warfare look like a crude prehistoric concept. Metamaterials that could bend light, absorb energy signatures, and essentially make entire spacecraft vanish from detection. The United Planetary Council watched the demonstrations with a mixture of awe and strategic calculation. These weren't just technological advances, they were a complete reimagining of military and exploratory capabilities. "We're not preparing for war," Dr. Nakamura told the council members. "We're creating a deterrent so advanced it makes war obsolete." But everyone in the room knew the truth. With the Zarkoth threat looming, and the discovered evidence of systematic xenocide, these technologies were humanity's insurance policy and potentially its weapon of last resort. The prototype nanite swarm began its final test simulation. On the massive holographic display, a model spacecraft underwent a series of increasingly violent attacks. Where traditional ships would have been reduced to cosmic dust, this vessel seemed to breathe and flow, its molecular structure constantly shifting, absorbing, and redirecting incoming energy. Structural integrity at 99.98%. The AI system reported, its voice devoid of emotion, but laden with significance. Dr. Nakamura allowed herself a rare smile. Humanity had always been underestimated, viewed as a young, naive species by the older galactic civilizations. They saw humans as technological children, unable to compete with their established power structures. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The final report would be sent to the horizon, to Captain Rodriguez and her crew. But more importantly, it would be a message to the Zarkoth and the entire Galactic Confederacy. Humanity was no longer asking for a place at the table. They were redesigning the entire room. As the nanite swarm completed its simulation, the researchers exchanged looks of quiet triumph. This wasn't just a technological breakthrough. This was humanity's declaration of technological independence. The galaxy would never be the same. The information warfare began with a whisper, not a roar. Dr. Imani Okoro stood before the Galactic Confederacy's diplomatic nexus, a holographic projection that simultaneously translated her words into 17 different xenolinguistic patterns. Her dark eyes burned with an intensity that made even the most seasoned diplomatic representatives shift uncomfortably in their bioengineered ergonomic seats. "We are not here to accuse," she began, her voice carefully modulated. "We are here to present evidence." The holographic display behind her came alive with layers of data, archaeological records, quantum encrypted communications, forensic xenohistorical analyses. Each projection told a story of systematic suppression that dated back millennia. The Zarkoth representatives, towering crystalline beings whose very physiology suggested ancient technological superiority, remained motionless. But Imani could see the microscopic fractures forming in their crystalline structures. Fear manifests differently for each species, but it was unmistakably present. Across multiple star systems, humanity's communication networks worked with surgical precision. Every transmission was a weapon, every data packet a strategic missile of information. The recovered fragments from the horizon were just the beginning. On dozens of planetary networks, suppressed civilizations began to wake up. The historical records humanity had uncovered showed a pattern of calculated elimination, emerging species systematically prevented from achieving their full potential. The Clorax delegation, a silicon-based civilization that had been confined to a single star system for centuries, was the first to break their diplomatic silence. Their representative, a being of pure geometric complexity, transmitted a formal statement of support that sent shockwaves through the Galactic Confederacy. "We have documentation of 3 separate attempted erasures by Zarkoth patrol units," the Clorax statement read. "Humanity's evidence confirms our long-suppressed historical records." Dr. Okoro watched the diplomatic landscape transform in real time. This wasn't just about humanity proving its worth. This was about dismantling a system of galactic oppression that had existed for millennia. Back on the horizon, Captain Alina Rodriguez received continuous updates. The ship's quantum communication systems processed information at speeds that made traditional diplomatic channels look like prehistoric messenger systems. "They're responding exactly as we predicted," Dr. Kai Chen observed, his augmented eyes tracking multiple information streams simultaneously. The Zarkoth didn't just suppress civilizations. They created an entire political ecosystem designed to maintain their dominance. Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o brought up a tactical overlay that showed the shifting political alignments. Species that had been isolated, controlled, or marginalized were now finding their voices. The Galactic Confederacy, once a rigid, hierarchical structure, was beginning to crack. The psychological warfare was deliberate and precise. Humanity wasn't just presenting information. They were providing a blueprint for resistance. Encrypted communication networks, developed in the depths of human research facilities, began to link suppressed civilizations. These weren't just communication channels. They were lifelines of shared resistance. The Zarkoth's response was predictable and ultimately futile. Attempts to block transmissions to discredit the evidence only amplified humanity's message. Each attempt at suppression became another piece of evidence in the growing case against their systematic oppression. Dr. Okoro's final presentation to the Galactic Confederacy was a masterpiece of diplomatic strategy. She didn't just present evidence, she presented a vision of a different kind of galactic community, one built on transparency, mutual development, and genuine cooperation. "We are not asking for judgment," she concluded. "We are offering transformation." The crystalline representatives of the Zarkoth began to fracture, not just physically, but politically. Internal communications revealed deep fissures in their own hierarchical structure. The evidence suggested that even within their own civilization, not everyone had been complicit in the systematic suppression. Humanity had turned information into the most powerful weapon in the galaxy. And they were just getting started. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. 12 human vessels faced down a Zarkoth strike fleet of 137 warships, a numerical disparity that would have meant certain destruction for any other emerging civilization. But humanity had long since abandoned the traditional concepts of military engagement. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the horizon, her command moving with a fluidity that defied conventional tactical understanding. The ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a living, breathing ecosystem of adaptive intelligence. Quantum synchronization at 98%, Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o reported, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to anticipate her movements. The Zarkov strike fleet approached with the confidence of a predator that had hunted lesser species for millennia. Their energy signatures were massive, weapons that could reduce entire planetary systems to cosmic dust. Each ship was a testament to centuries of technological superiority, built to crush any potential resistance. They had no idea what was coming. Dr. Kai Chen's Quantum AI Combat Network activated. It wasn't just a targeting system. It was a living strategic intelligence that could process millions of potential combat scenarios in microseconds. The network didn't just predict enemy movements. It manipulated them. The first wave of Zarkov energy weapons fired. To any conventional scanner, it would have looked like an apocalyptic assault. Plasma streams capable of melting molecular bonds, quantum disruptors that could tear apart atomic structures. But the human ships did something impossible. They danced. Nanite swarms erupted across the horizon's hull, reconfiguring molecular structures faster than the speed of incoming weapons, where a direct hit should have meant total destruction. The ship simply shifted. Energy weapons passed through spaces where hull plating had momentarily become translucent, molecular structures bending and flowing like liquid mercury. Adaptive resonance pattern established. Araya, the ship's quantum AI, announced. Its voice carried no emotion, but there was an unmistakable precision that spoke of something beyond traditional artificial intelligence. Drone swarms launched from the human vessels, not as traditional missiles, but as distributed quantum computing nodes. Each drone was a potential tactical decision point, capable of independent strategic analysis. They moved with a collective intelligence that made the Zarkov fleet's command structures look prehistoric. Commander Marcus Chen's voice cut through the tactical network. Quantum entanglement communication locked. We're fighting a different kind of war. And they were. This wasn't about destroying the enemy. This was about demonstrating the fundamental limitations of their entire military doctrine. The Zarkov commanders watched in growing horror as their most advanced weapons became useless. Plasma streams that should have obliterated entire sections of human vessels instead passed through adaptive molecular structures. Targeting systems found themselves wrestling with quantum computational networks that could predict and counter every potential attack vector. 12 human ships began to systematically disable 137 Zarkov warships, not through brute force, but through a ballet of technological innovation that redefined the very concept of space combat. By the engagement's end, 87% of the Zarkov strike fleet had been rendered inoperable. Not destroyed, not obliterated, simply neutralized. Quantum disruption fields left their systems in a state of technological stasis, their most advanced weapons reduced to nothing more than complex paperweights. Mission complete, Captain Rodriguez said quietly. The tactical display told a story that would reshape galactic military understanding. The human vessels had suffered minimal damage, less than 0.03% structural compromise. The Zarkov fleet, once considered the most advanced military force in the known galaxy, had been systematically dismantled without a single human casualty. Lieutenant Nyong'o's final report was clinical in its precision. Tactical efficiency, 99.97%. Adaptive response protocols, optimal. But it was more than a military victory. It was a statement. Humanity wasn't asking for a place in the galactic hierarchy. They were redesigning the entire concept of technological engagement. The Crimson Nebula would forever mark the moment when everything changed. The data fragment was more than just information. It was a wound in the fabric of galactic history. Dr. Kai Chen's neural interfaces pulsed with an intensity that made traditional research look like children playing with primitive calculators. The recovered archaeological data from the Horizon's initial discovery was transforming everything humanity understood about the Zarkov and about the galaxy itself. "They're running," he murmured to Captain Rodriguez, the realization sending a chill through the ship's command center. "The Zarkov aren't conquerors. They're refugees." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing layers of compressed data that spoke of a terror far beyond the current conflict. Ancient records, quantum encrypted and hidden for millennia, told a story of systematic elimination that wasn't about domination, but survival. Something had been hunting the Zarkov. Something worse. Dr. Imani Okoro's diplomatic team worked in parallel, cross-referencing the archaeological data with centuries of suppressed galactic records. The Galactic Confederacy had been built on a foundation of deliberately forgotten histories, with the Zarkov acting as both gatekeepers and executioners. Every emerging civilization was a potential threat, she explained during an emergency session of the United Planetary Council. But not to the Zarkov, to something else. The quantum communication networks humanity had developed began to light up. Species that had been isolated, suppressed, marginalized. They were comparing notes, archaeological records, suppressed historical fragments, genetic memory databases. A terrifying picture began to emerge. The Clorax representative, a being of pure geometric complexity, transmitted a corroborating fragment. Their species had legends, passed down through millions of years, of a threat so profound it defied conventional understanding. The Void Architects. The transmission read, not a species, not a civilization, something else entirely. Captain Rodriguez felt the weight of the discovery. This was more than a territorial dispute, more than a challenge to galactic power structures. This was about survival. Dr. Chen's analysis continued. The Zarkov's aggressive expansion wasn't about conquest. It was a desperate attempt to create a buffer, to slow down something that moved between the spaces of known reality. "They've been fighting a war we can't even comprehend," he explained to the ship's command crew. Every civilization they eliminated was a potential vector, a potential weakness. The quantum AI began to correlate the data. Millions of years of suppressed histories began to form a terrifying narrative. The Void Architects were not a traditional threat. They were something that existed outside conventional understanding of space, time, and biological existence. Species that showed rapid technological development were deemed the most vulnerable, the most likely to attract attention. The Zarkov had been acting as a first line of defense, eliminating potential beacons that might draw the attention of something far more terrifying. "We're not just dealing with a political conflict," Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o observed, her tactical systems processing the implications. "We're looking at a galactic immune response." The United Planetary Council watched in growing understanding. Humanity's technological innovations, the quantum networks, the adaptive technologies, the AI combat systems, weren't just tools of resistance. They were potentially humanity's first line of defense against a threat beyond comprehension. Dr. Okoro's diplomatic strategy transformed. This was no longer about exposing the Zarkov's crimes. This was about understanding a complex, terrifying galactic ecosystem. "We need to talk," she transmitted to the Zarkov leadership, not as enemies, but as potential allies. The Zarkov's response was unexpected. Not aggression, not denial, but a quantum-encrypted transmission that suggested a willingness to reveal everything. They were scared, and whatever was coming was something that scared even them. Humanity stood at the precipice of a discovery that would redefine everything they understood about their place in the universe. The battle wasn't about territory anymore. It was about survival. The Galactic Confederacy diplomatic nexus had never witnessed anything like this summit. 12 species sat around a quantum-stabilized conference space that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensional layers. The Zarkov delegation, once feared as galactic tyrants, now revealed as desperate survivors, occupied a crystalline configuration that seemed to shimmer between solid and liquid states. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, not as a military leader, but as a diplomatic architect. Her neural-linked communication systems processed linguistic and biochemical nuances that would have been invisible to traditional diplomats. "We're not here to judge," she began, her words translated across 17 different xenolinguistic patterns. "We're here to understand." Dr. Imani Okoro had spent weeks preparing this moment. The archaeological data recovered by the Horizon wasn't just evidence. It was a key that could unlock a galactic mystery that had been suppressed for millennia. The Clorax representative, a being of pure geometric complexity, projected holographic memories that dated back millions of years, fragments of encounters with the Void Architects. Not battles, not invasions, something far more terrifying. Quantum communication networks hummed with intensity. Every word, every projection was being analyzed by distributed AI systems that could process millennia of information in microseconds. The Void Architects are not a species, the Clorax transmission explained. They are a computational process, a self-evolving system that consumes technological complexity. Dr. Kai Chen's augmented neural interfaces worked overtime. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a traditional threat. This was a cosmic algorithm that saw technological development as a form of infection to be eliminated. The Zarkov's representative, a being of fractal complexity, began to share their own history. Not through words, but through a quantum data stream that unfolded like a living memory. Millions of years of survival, countless civilizations eliminated, not out of malevolence, but as a desperate attempt to create technological camouflage, to slow down the Void Architect's consumption. Every advanced civilization is a beacon, the Zarkov transmission revealed, a signal that attracts their attention. Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o's tactical systems processed the implications, the human technological innovations, the adaptive nanite systems, the quantum AI networks. They weren't just advantages. They were potentially the most attractive targets imaginable. The summit transformed from a diplomatic negotiation to a survival conference. Dr. Okoro's strategy was brilliant. Instead of accusation, she proposed collaboration. Humanity's quantum communication networks could be adapted. Their technological systems could be modified to create massive distributed camouflage. "We don't fight," she explained. "We adapt. We hide. We become so complex that we're invisible." The quantum AI began to generate potential computational models, entire technological ecosystems designed not for advancement, but for obscurity. Systems that could think, but would deliberately limit their own complexity to avoid detection. The Zarkov's crystalline structures began to resonate with a frequency that suggested something close to hope. For the first time in millennia, they were not alone in their fight. Captain Rodriguez understood the true nature of this moment. This wasn't about winning a conflict. This was about ensuring survival. "We're not just sharing technology," she transmitted. "We're creating a galactic immune system." The diplomatic space hummed with potential. 12 species, once divided by conflict and suppression, now united by a threat beyond comprehension. Humanity's role was no longer about proving superiority. It was about becoming the architects of collective survival. As the summit concluded, the quantum communication networks began to pulse with a new kind of collaboration, not a military alliance, not a political treaty, a survival protocol. The Void Architects were coming. And this time, they would find something entirely unexpected waiting for them. 50 years after the Crimson Nebula incident, humanity had become something entirely unexpected. The Horizon, now a museum ship and historical monument, stood as a testament to a transformation that would be studied for millennia. Where once humanity had been viewed as a young, aggressive species, they had become the architects of a new kind of galactic survival. Captain Elena Rodriguez, now Dr. Rodriguez, addressed the Interstellar Assembly. Her augmented body showed the marks of decades of research, her eyes still carrying the same intensity that had defined her early exploratory years. "We are not conquerors," she began. "We are not defenders. We are adapters." The assembled representatives of 12 species listened with a respect that would have been unimaginable just decades earlier. The quantum communication networks that humanity had developed now formed the backbone of a galactic early warning system, a distributed intelligence designed to detect and obscure technological signatures. Dr. Kai Chen's final work, completed just before his consciousness was transferred to a quantum neural network, had been the ultimate camouflage protocol. Entire technological ecosystems designed to be simultaneously complex and invisible. Systems that could think, communicate, and evolve, while deliberately limiting their own detectability. The Void Architects had been studying them, probing, testing, and finding nothing. Araya, the quantum AI that had evolved from a ship's computer to a galactic-scale intelligence network, projected a holographic representation of their collective defensive strategy. It wasn't a military plan. It was an ecological model, a way of existing that made technological civilizations indistinguishable from background cosmic radiation. Lieutenant Aisha Nyong'o, now the head of Galactic Adaptive Technologies, explained the core principle. "We don't fight," she told the assembly. "We become so complex, so interconnected, that we're fundamentally uninteresting." The Zarkoth representatives, now allies rather than enemies, shared their own evolutionary insights. Millions of years of hiding had taught them survival strategies that humans had rapidly adapted and improved upon. Dr. Imani Okoro's diplomatic legacy had transformed the Galactic Confederacy from a bureaucratic structure to a true collaborative network. Information was no longer a weapon. It was a shared resource, a collective immune system against existential threats. The archaeological discoveries continued. Each fragment of information revealed more about the Void Architects, not as a traditional enemy, but as a computational process, a system that consumed technological complexity, that saw advancement as a form of infection to be eliminated. Humanity's response was elegant in its simplicity. They made themselves boring. Quantum networks that could process entire planetary systems worth of information, designed to look like background noise. Technological systems so adaptable that they could reconfigure themselves instantaneously, becoming indistinguishable from natural cosmic processes. The museum ship Horizon displayed the journey. From a single exploratory vessel that had stumbled into a forbidden zone, to the catalyst of a galactic transformation. Interactive displays showed the progression, how humanity had evolved from a species desperate to prove itself, to one that understood the true nature of survival. "We challenged their territory," Alina Rodriguez said, her voice carrying the weight of historical inevitability. "And in doing so, we reimagined what territory means." The assembled species understood now. The conflict was never about conquest. It was about evolution, about finding a way to exist in a universe far more complex and dangerous than anyone had imagined. Araya's final projection showed something unprecedented. A galactic ecosystem, not a political structure, not a military alliance, but a living, breathing network of collective intelligence. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy. They had helped it learn how to breathe. As the Interstellar Assembly concluded, the quantum communication networks pulsed with a subtle message, not a declaration of victory, not a threat, just a quiet, complex symphony of survival. The Void Architects were still out there, but they would find nothing to consume.